It's the first day of a brand new week, so let's catch you up on some of the news items that have been taking place involving the Ontario Hockey League. First off, with a trade that was announced this morning between the Kingston Frontenacs and the Kitchener Rangers. Now, new this year is that the import draft will be 3 rounds, as CHL clubs will be allowed to have 3 import players on their roster starting in the 2025-26 regular season. But with that, teams are now allowed to trade those import picks. And we have our first trade involving OHL teams to talk about, as the Kingston Frontenacs. They have received the playing rights of Slovak forward Tomas Pobezal from the Kitchener Rangers, along with Kitchener's second-round import pick for the 2025 selection. While the Rangers, in return, they received Kingston's first-round draft import spot, along with a 2029 8th-round pick. Now, that's conditional as long as Pobezal plays with the Frontenacs. Pobezal, he is a player eligible for the 2025 NHL draft, so depending on who takes him, may decide if Pobezal will end up playing in the Ontario Hockey League next year. Now, remember, the Frontenacs last season had great success with Tuomas Jurinen and Emil Piniemi, as those two had an impact, the two Finnish players. And we'll see if maybe the Frontenacs can bring another important piece to this team that's entering a bit of a rebuild here, but still getting the likes of Pobezal will go a long way. Now, the CHL Import Draft is held after the NHL Draft, and that'll take place on July 2nd. Now, some big news involving the Brantford Bulldogs. It came out on Friday afternoon that Jay McKee has signed a 3-year extension to remain behind the bench of the Brantford Bulldogs. And this is a big question after Turek left the team at the end of the regular season. Of course, he's the general manager. The next question was, do the Bulldogs change the voice behind the bench? And the team has decided that they're going to bring back McKee. He's been with the club since 2021, when the Hamilton Bulldogs made their run to the OHL Championship, where they defeated Windsor in 7 games. He's now the winningest coach in franchise history. Apparently, he was approached by the Philadelphia Flyers. He was in consideration for the top job there at the National Hockey League level, but McKee has decided to remain with the Brantford Bulldogs organization, and I expect big things in the upcoming year for Brantford. This team has a lot of pieces falling into place, and it all really, Jay McKee has been solid behind the bench, and it's good to have that consistency for this team as they go into next season. So we don't know about the details with the pay and whatnot, but for Spencer Hyman, the general manager of the Brantford Bulldogs, saying McKee is one of the best, if not the best, coach in the Canadian Hockey League. So some high praise coming from the general manager of the Brantford Bulldogs. On Friday, it was also revealed that the Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League, they are changing their playoff format for next year. The most recent format, you would see the Eastern and Western conferences play each other in the opening 2 rounds, and then in the semifinal, you would be reseeded. So the top-ranked team from the regular season would play then the 4th best ranked team, and then you would decide who would meet in the final. This year it was Rimouski against Moncton. But starting next season, they're getting away with the divisions. So no more divisions. You still have 2 associations, is what they call them, the East and the West. So those 2 conferences will play in the first round, so 1 versus 8. But then in the second round forward, it goes into a 1 versus, so the top seeded team overall would then play the lowest seed that moved on to the second round of the playoffs. So a very fascinating change here for the Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League. This is a league that has had no problems testing out different playoff formats. They've had the traditional East versus West, 1 versus 8 in the past. Then they switched to a 1 versus 16. That was used for a few seasons. And then now using this kind of, I guess you can call it a hybrid model up until next season. So I think this is a great idea. I know there's been a lot of fans, even in the Ontario Hockey League, that have been saying maybe it's time to adjust the playoff format, because for the OHL, they haven't touched it since the expansion that saw the Mississauga Ice Dogs and Brampton Battalion join in 1998. It's been the 1 versus 8 Eastern Conference versus Western Conference format ever since. There's been discussions about why, for Kitchener, for example, had the second best record in the Western Conference, and yet Windsor was higher than them just because they won their division. I still agree that if you win the division, you should get some sort of added bonus, but maybe in the second round, it's adjusted so that when we saw Kitchener versus Windsor, maybe the Rangers could have had home ice advantage instead of Windsor. But I think the Quebec Maritime League decision takes that a step further. Why not just get rid of the divisions? Have your two conferences, and then whoever wins the conference, yes, they get home ice advantage, and they'll play the eighth seed coming out of it, and then reseed overall in the second, third, and ultimately the championship round. So I was curious, how would it look like in the OHL if we had that format here? You take all the results coming out of the first round, and then you reseed with the overall. You would still have London versus Erie in the second round of the playoffs with all the teams that advance. But in the second round, we would have saw Kitchener versus Oshawa, Windsor versus Kingston, and then Brantford versus Barrie. And of course, the Colts would have been on the road in that series as Brantford ended up ahead of them in the overall standing. So it would have looked very different. And could you have imagined if we would have had, say, a London Kitchener or a London Windsor OHL final? Just the rivalry between those clubs would have been something else. Plus, having Kitchener meet Oshawa in the second round would have brought back an old rivalry from back in the 1980s and early 90s where those two teams would meet in OHL championship series. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe the OHL will start to venture in this direction. So stay tuned for that. And let me know in the comments below if maybe this playoff structure that the Q is introducing is something you'd like to see done in the Ontario Hockey League going into next season. Now, there have also been a few interesting signings. Of course, with the NCAA ruling, we've seen more players come over from the USHL to the OHL before going off to the NCAA. And the Erie Otters have added some sandpaper to their lineup, adding Ritter Coombs. And for Coombs, his dad actually played for both the Kitchener Rangers and Belleville Bulls. So some history there for fans of those two organizations, as Coombs will now play for the Erie Otters. He has a commitment to Providence College for 25-26, but he's extended that back so he can play with the Erie Otters in the Ontario Hockey League. So he'll play 1 year in the O. And last year actually spent time between the Dubuque Fighting Saints and the Sioux Falls Stampede. 50 games, he collected 23 points, 10 goals, 13 assists, and had 144 penalty minutes. So the Erie Otters looking to be a little more physical going into next season. Now, the Windsor Spitfires have also made a signing, picking up Jonathan Brown. Now, he was not drafted, so he's a free agent signing. He played for Shattuck St. Mary's program for the past 4 seasons. 4 goals, 20 assists, 24 points last year. So obviously the defenseman, more of a stay-at-home. But what stood out to me is that he's a multi-citizen here. He's got his U.S. citizenship, his British and French. So very diverse. He's also committed to Yale University for 26-27. So the Windsor Spitfires getting a couple of years out of this defenseman. I just thought it was a very interesting signing, Jonathan Brown. Now the North Bay Battalion, they've also made a signing. They've signed Michigan commit Brent Harper. Now he's a big defenseman. He's looking to bring that size to the Ontario Hockey League. Last year, just 3 goals, 12 assists, 15 points, playing for the Des Moines Buccaneers of the USHL. So another USHL player moving over to the OHL for next season. I know we've talked a lot about the players going from the OHL to the NCAA and the loss that's affecting some teams, but these are some key players coming over from the USHL to the Ontario Hockey League as early as next season. So some very interesting signings for Erie, Windsor, and North Bay. And we'll see how their game transpires into the OHL. So those are the news items for today. It's how I see it from the booth. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on any of these items. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we will talk to you again soon.